Welcome into another edition of the DFS Report. I'm Brock Seguin. We got Zach Laing with us as always. We've got a 10-game slate on our hands for this Tuesday evening. Zach, you've got a show to do in about an hour, so we won't waste too much time. We will try to race through these 10 games as quickly as we can. Let's start with the goalies, as always. We've got Alex Lyon for the Detroit Red Wings. It's going to be Anton Forsberg for the Ottawa Senators. Jonathan Quick gets the start for the Rangers with Igor Shesterkin still sidelined. It'll be a Jake Ottinger for the Dallas Stars. The Lightning are expected to go with Andrei Vasilevsky versus Pyotr Kochetkov. It'll be Tristan Jarry for the Pittsburgh Penguins up against Elvis Merzlikins for the Blue Jackets. Jeremy Swayman likely to start for the Boston Bruins as they go up against the Edmonton Oilers, who will counter with Stuart Skinner. Ivan Fedotov versus Joseph Wallace. The Flyers host the Maple Leafs. Philip Gustafsson versus Jordan Binnington in Minnesota tonight. Then it'll likely be Connor Hellebuyck, or no, it will be Connor Hellebuyck likely versus UC Saros, but unconfirmed there, a rematch from a week ago. John Gibson gets a nod again after a sparkling performance in his last outing. He'll face the Calgary Flames, who will counter most likely with Dustin Wolf, who's starting to see the lion's share of the work for the Flames. And Alexander Georgiev will start for the San Jose Sharks. It will be Ilya Samsonov likely for the Vegas Golden Knights. So those are your 20 projected starters for this evening. Let's get to the first game. We've got the Detroit Red Wings hosting the Ottawa Senators. The Red Wings winners of 4 consecutive games up against an Ottawa Senators team that's scuffling a bit coming out of the Christmas break still without Linus Ullmark as well. Despite that, the Senators are small road favorites at minus 114. Matchups for this game, not terrible on the Detroit Red Wings side of things. You're basically, under Todd McClellan, they've elected to hard match the top line for the most part up against the opposition's top line, and then a bit of a free-for-all in the bottom 9. So you're going to see a lot of Larkin versus the Tkachuk line tonight, most likely, and then the bottom 9s will likely just cycle through against each other. For the Red Wings, it looks okay for that top line, which is really the only line we've really considered targeting from the Detroit Red Wings side of things. DeBrincat and Kane have been pretty solid on the second line. On the Sens side, it doesn't look great for that top line, the Tkachuk line, but it looks pretty decent for the Stützle line. You're going to have Stützle, Giroux, and Batherson back together tonight on that second line. That Stützle, Giroux, Batherson line has also been pretty solid. 35 scoring chances. They're just not really getting to the dangerous areas of the ice. Just 9 high danger chances for them, but they've controlled the puck pretty well. 61% Corsi for 35 scoring chances is pretty solid against the Red Wings middle 6 here. That's not all that great defensively. So this game to me doesn't really spark my interest too much. I think I'm going to have some pieces of this game, but you take a look here at the big board. Detroit 1 grades out 32nd overall. Detroit 2 grades out 29th. Ottawa does grade out a little bit better. Ottawa 1 grades out 14th, and Ottawa 2 21st. So none of these lines really popping in the charts. They're all fairly reasonably priced. We've talked about Tkachuk, Pinto, and Ridley Gregg really playing quite well. Their offensive metrics are really, really strong. They do draw a fairly difficult matchup tonight against that Larkin line. What are you doing with this game, Zach? To me, it doesn't feel like a game that I'm going to have a tremendous amount of exposure to. The general public feels pretty similarly as well. The top line of the Sens at 6%, the second line at just 2%, and then the Red Wings coming in under 2%. So not a game that anybody's really playing a whole lot of. Are you planning on getting to it?
Probably not a whole lot. I am not doing a 20 max tonight. I'm only building 5 lineups. So I think just given my limited exposure to teams and spots tonight, I'm probably fading this game. I think if I was to attack it from a 20 max perspective, I think going around the Detroit power play would be a fairly decent way to go. They got the second best power play as of late here, best matchup on the entire slate in terms of the power play. So obviously that entails a little bit of Detroit 1, a little bit of Detroit 2, Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat, and Patrick Kane, and Moritz Seider on the blue line. I might have some interest in maybe a Seider mini stack with somebody from that top 6 there. Alex DeBrincat probably is giving you the best floor right now as a mini stack option there, coming in $5,500, 9.9 shots on goal per hour of ice time over his last 20 games, 1.6 goals. So he's scoring at a pretty good clip here right now. I think from a full stack perspective, I'm probably staying off of this game as a whole. Ottawa 1, they do seem to be in a decent spot. You mentioned how good that line has been as of late. And the offensive numbers have been great. 4 goals per hour against 3.1 expected. They're generating a number of high quality looks. So couldn't blame anybody for getting to Ottawa 1 tonight. I'm just not sure if I'm going to be there.
Yeah, Detroit's top power play advantage on the night is definitely intriguing, and that's probably the reason that I'll be getting to them a little bit. Mostly just because obviously that power play looks really, really good right now, and they're seeing no ownership at all. Anton Forsberg certainly not a goalie that frightens me. So if I am getting to this game, it's probably going to be more so on that Detroit side of things. They look like a really interesting way to get different tonight. Like you said, you probably don't need to like full stack that power play, but a mini stack of DeBrincat and Kane is very affordable at literally under 2% ownership. And then if you want to go Larkin, Raymond, they've been playing pretty well, both under 6K, seeing literally no ownership as well. I think that's a nice way to get different on tonight's slate. And then, yeah, if you want to pair them with Moritz Seider as well, really, pretty quality matchups at 5v5, basically average or slightly above average tonight. The offensive metrics are pretty solid for both lines, basically just average on tonight's slate, but then you get that added boost of the power play. I don't mind that at all. So yeah, definitely a little bit more interest on the Detroit side of things. Maybe a little bit of a homer pick for me, but you kind of drove it home for me there as well. So I feel comfortable there. Any final thoughts on this game before we get to New York and Dallas?
No, got a really interesting one here between the Rangers and the Stars, eh?
Yeah, very interesting game here. The Stars minus 162 road favorites in New York up against the Igor Shesterkinless Rangers. 3.6 implied total is the second highest on the entire slate, which is interesting. You factor in, how bad the Rangers have been defensively, and then now you've got this new look top six for the Stars over the last couple of weeks with no Marchment and no Tyler Seguin. They've really loaded up on that top six. And I was messaging you before the show. It's really no secret because the ownership is certainly there. They grade out as the fifth best line, but 11.6% ownership tonight for Dallas too, which is the second highest of any line on tonight's slate. But to me, this is a line that I am very comfortable getting over the field at. They're relatively chalky, but still nothing crazy. At 15,300, the price tag is amazing, and their underlying metrics are just ridiculous. 3.6 expected goals for per 60, 35 scoring chances, but their actual data, their actual underlying metrics, which is just still too small of a sample size for me to use, is even more outrageous. 5.2 expected goals for per 60, 47.3 scoring chances for per 60, 24.2 high danger chances. So if I use that smaller sample, which is only about 52 minutes, if I would have used that, they probably grade out as the number one line overall tonight. So those metrics are a little bit noisy. I've dumbed them down a little bit, but they still grade out tremendously well. And if they're anywhere close to as good as those metrics suggest that they are through 52 minutes of 5v5 ice time, they're an unbelievable line to target tonight. The matchup is outstanding. They have an 89.9 matchup score, the best on the Dallas Stars. They're going to see a heavy mix of the middle six of the Rangers tonight, which is a middle six that has really struggled defensively, giving up tons of high danger chances against a line that's generating 24.2 high danger chances for per 60. This is an unbelievable spot for Dallas too. I'm very comfortable getting to at least 20%, doubling the field on Dallas too, because this feels like a great spot at a very reasonable price tag that you can easily pair them with a lot of different options tonight. So yeah, pretty much all in on Dallas too for me tonight. And obviously Dallas won in a pretty good spot as well. They grade out 19th best, similar price tag. Roberts and Hintz have really started to put things together offensively as of late. Their offensive metrics still very, very good. Their matchup very, very similar. So I don't mind getting to Dallas one as a bit of a different option, a bit of a pivot spot. They're literally seeing less than half the ownership of Dallas too. So yeah, I don't feel quite as strongly, but I don't mind getting to Dallas one at all either. This looks like a really good matchup. The Rangers continue to struggle defensively. Jonathan Quick getting the start. So I'm pretty comfortable getting double the field on both these Dallas lines tonight and just kind of hoping that they can hit for me tonight.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. I mean, these guys look like they're in a tremendous spot here tonight. Dallas, too, the metrics have been pretty solid as of late, all things considering. You're getting good floors from Jamie Benn, 8.0 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games. Wyatt Johnson, 8.6 shots on goal over his last 20 games. Sorry if anybody can hear the noise in the background here. I'm not entirely sure what that is. But anyways, lots of production coming from this line. Jamie Benn scoring the most goals as of late, 1.1 goals per hour over his last 20. But Wyatt Johnson, man, 1.6 individual expected goals per hour over his last 20, only 0.9 goals scored. So he's somebody who's due for an uptick in some offense here.
Yeah, it looks like a spot in which they can definitely get rolling or continue to roll here tonight. Any interest in the Rangers side of things? I mean, the matchups are pretty bleak. The Zibanejad line has the better of the two matchups, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe yesterday I said that it didn't look that like JT Miller was all that interested, and then he all of a sudden looked very interested. So maybe if I say that Mika Zibanejad doesn't look all that interested, he will show up this evening for Rangers fans. The power play pretty bleak for the Rangers tonight. The worst ranked power play advantage on the slate, 28th ranked power play up against number 1 PK. Really, really rough stuff. For Dallas, you've got the number 6 ranked PK on the night. I'm probably not getting to any New York Rangers. Are you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if I was 20 maxing, I think I'd be comfortable mixing them in at 5%, which is what they're projecting for ownership wise tonight. Given that I'm just building a few lineups here on this slate tonight, I don't think I'll be getting there. But you know what? They grade out 9th best overall. I think they're in an okay enough spot, even if they haven't really been the best as of late here. The problem is that there's not a ton of shot volume coming from these guys. Artemi Panarin's shot volume has really dropped off as of late, only 7.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time over his last 20 games. So I think that's a reason to have a little bit of concern there with that New York 1 spot right now. But I think they're an okay enough play if you're 20 maxing. Mix them in at 5% and see if they can go off.
Yeah, I agree. I probably won't be getting there too much. If you're playing Dallas 1, they correlate a little bit better with Miro Heiskanen. If you're playing Dallas 2, they kind of correlate with anybody. So if you want to pay down, Thomas Harley looks like an okay spot there. If you're trying to correlate with and you can't afford Miro Heiskanen. Let's move on to the third game of the night. You've got the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Carolina Hurricanes, two very, very good teams. Going head to head, the Hurricanes are minus 112 road favorites in this one. A pretty tight matchup here. Matchup wise, pretty good for the top sixes and pretty bleak for the bottom sixes. It's going to be a lot of top six versus top six, a lot of bottom six versus bottom six in this game. Both bottom sixes are very, very good defensively. So that's going to kind of just be a very, sloggy game in the bottom six. But the top six looks okay here for both sides, really. The offensive metrics obviously continue to be just ridiculously good for Tampa 1 and Tampa 2. Pretty good on the Carolina side of things as well. So it's kind of an interesting game in where it looks like the scorers are going to score and the bottom sixes are just going to just be killing time out there. If you take a look at the big board here, Tampa 1 grades out extremely well, but they are $26,700. I believe that is the most expensive line we've seen this season. And Tampa 2 has always kind of been a favorite of mine, a favorite of the show. They're at $17,000, 18th best line. And then on the Carolina side of things, the top line grades out 16th best at $16,900. I don't know how much exposure I'm going to end up with in this game. I think that if I was going to target this game, it's probably more on the Tampa Bay side of things. But it's very difficult to get up to that top line, and the public feels the same way, projected for just 1.7% ownership. Carolina 1 is projected for 3%. So this is a game that the public's not really getting to. Is it a decent leverage spot in your opinion, or is it one that you're obviously also staying away from? Excuse me.
I think there's some reason to have interest in this game here. I mean, these have been some fairly exciting games between these two sides. In the last 10 games played, the Carolina Hurricanes are 5-4, going up against the Lightning in these head-to-heads, despite getting outscored 29-24. So averaging a little over 5 goals per game. I don't know if there's going to be a ton of offense coming here. It does feel like it's probably one of these 3-2, 4-3 sort of games where, it's kind of a grind. I like Tampa 1 here in this spot. I think they're in a fairly good place here. Strong matchup score. I got a little bit of interest here, but again, I think, given that I'm probably leaning towards this being a bit of a lower scoring, tighter defensive style of game, I'm probably going to stay off of it for my 5 lineups here tonight. If I was building more, I'd maybe mix in a little bit here at 5%. And, the public kind of feels the same way right now. I mean, Carolina 1 is drawing the most ownership of any line here at 3%. Tampa 1 at 1.8%, Tampa 2 at 1.2%. So I think if you're looking to get different, it's a fair spot to go to. But in the same breath, Tampa 1, I mean, just how expensive they are, 26,700. Like you mentioned, that's pretty restrictive in terms of the cost here on this slate. So I think that might be a reason why we're seeing the public fading this game here.
Yeah, I think if I was playing this game, it would probably be mostly just Tampa 2 in a leverage spot. But both power plays not playing all that well as of late. 20th and 24th over the last 10 games, going up against PKs that are quite solid. So literally among the bottom 5 in terms of power play matchups tonight. So there's just not really a whole lot here, I don't think. I think obviously these lines are probably going to get on the board, but is it going to be enough to take down a big tournament? Probably not. Okay, let's move on to Pittsburgh and Columbus with game that is a little bit more intriguing and drawing a shitload of ownership. Pittsburgh minus 145 home favorites against the Blue Jackets with a 2.9 implied total. The matchups here really, really good on the Blue Jackets side of things, decent on the Pittsburgh side of things. A little bit surprised that this game grades out with as low of a pace score as it does, because you would think that this is going to be a pretty high event game. I think the matchups that we're looking at, the matchups that we care about, those matchups are probably going to be higher event, higher pace. The game as a whole, when the bottom sixes are on the ice, probably a little bit lower event. I think that the pace score is being drastically affected by this Pittsburgh fourth line, which I don't even think exists. They do nothing when they're on the ice, which is just wild. I've never seen numbers this bad. They just generate literally nothing. And then Columbus 3 doesn't do a heck of a lot either. So I think that the pace score for this game is somewhat misleading. Because I do think that when you've got Columbus 1 and Pittsburgh 1, the lines that we're interested in, it is going to be a little bit higher event. In terms of the matchups, it's going to be a lot of Pittsburgh 1 versus the top 6 of the Blue Jackets. And the top 6 of the Blue Jackets has been pretty solid defensively. On the other side, you've got a lot of Columbus 1 against Pittsburgh 1. You also have them going up against that fourth line, which is less than ideal because, like I said, they just basically do nothing. But when they're going up against the Crosby line, it does look like they're going to be able to generate some magic. This line has just been unbelievable. They have been worse on the road. So I do have a little bit of concern about just jamming Columbus 1 in tonight. But at 10% ownership, they grade it as the number 1 line to target. It's really hard to ignore that. And a lot of the really good high-priced forwards on tonight's slate, the Austin Matthews, the Nikita Kucherovs, the Connor McDavids, they don't have the best matchups in this game. And when you look at the forward projections for tonight, the highest projection of any forward is 13.8, which is Austin Matthews. You take a look at the defenseman. Zach Werenski is the highest projected player on the entire slate. He's just been that good. He's on pace. I wrote him up this morning. He's on pace for like 329 shots, which is just that's like Brent Burns of a decade ago, like unheard of as a defenseman. He is just unbelievable, plays so many minutes. So he is a guy that I want a ton of exposure to tonight. The field does as well at 22% ownership. But I don't know necessarily just how much Columbus 1 I'm going to get to, but I feel like at this point, they're just blowing slates up. And if you don't play enough of them, you kind of get left behind. So I'm going to be kind of in that soft spot where I'm probably over the field. So I have a little bit of leverage on them without kind of banking my entire night on them nuking the field. So John brings up a good idea here. And this is actually kind of what I was flirting with in my daily faceoff lineup. I never ended up going to it, but a Werenski Marchenko 2-man mini stack is definitely very interesting if you don't want to completely tie your entire night to Columbus 1. But yeah, I want leverage on this line because they have been just game breakers, but I'm not going to go too crazy. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a good spot to get some leverage over the field. You mentioned the road concerns, and I think that's something to kind of make sure we take note of here, specifically with Zach Werenski. And I mean, he has been absolutely incredible as of late. In his last 10 games, 2 goals and 14 points, 51 shots on goal, 21 block shots. He's averaging 22 DraftKings points per game over his last 10. I mean, that's incredible production. But when you take a look at his home and road splits on the road this season, he's only averaging 10.9 DraftKings points per game versus 22.5 at home. So I think that's a pretty stark difference. In his last 10 games, 2 road games, I think he has played here, scoring 7.3 points against Boston, 11.2 against Philadelphia. I think this Tampa Bay game where he had 3 points as well does come into play there too. So definitely something to be kind of cautious about and careful with when you are building your lineups. But in the same breath, like you said, man, they've just been absolutely nuking slates, and they are in an absolutely great spot here going up against this top 6, or the first line mainly of the Pittsburgh Penguins. For as much as the Crosby line has been generating offense, they're just giving up a ton defensively too. 4.7 goals against per hour as of late for them. So the struggle has been real for the Pittsburgh Penguins here. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Blue Jackets top line was able to pop off and break this slate again. So I think I'm going to be meeting the field in terms of ownership here on this Columbus 1 spot. And honestly, I kind of got some interest in the Pittsburgh Penguins too here. They're obviously drawing a fair amount of ownership as well. Pittsburgh 1 coming in at 12%, which is a higher ownership as a full stack than Columbus 1 is here.
Yeah, highest on line on the slate.
I think pardon me?
Highest online on the slate.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So I think they're in an interesting spot too. I'll probably be comfortable meeting this Pittsburgh one ownership as well.
Yeah, they look like they're in a good spot. They've been red hot, right? Rust, Crosby, Raquel has really been the line that's just carrying this team right now. They also fully correlate on the top power play unit. Yeah, like I have no problem getting there. A lot of this ownership's coming in on Sidney Crosby, 16%, Rust or Raquel, excuse me, down at 7.2%. The only issue I have with this line is they were somewhat valuable for a while, and now the price tag has gotten to a point where it's like, are they really worth it? Like, yes, they've been great, but man, 22,200 is a lot to stomach and makes it a little bit more difficult to build around, which is why I still feel a little bit stronger about Columbus one at, basically $2,000 cheaper. The Blue Jackets, a lot of their, I think, early season road woes have been put behind them a little bit. They've been close to they've had some bigger games. They've been shut out twice in their last 10 road games, but even despite being shut out twice, they've still averaged 2.8 goals for per game. So they figured it out a little bit on the road in the last couple of months, as opposed to being just terrible at the start of the season. So my concerns about them on the road are a little bit less than they were early in the season. But yeah, Pittsburgh one's a line I'm going to get to. I'm going to be a little bit cautious just because they're a little bit difficult to build around. And I feel more comfortable, I think, fading Pittsburgh one than Columbus one. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you there on that one.
The power plays in this one, both power plays have been lights out. Pittsburgh has the number 2 power play advantage on the night. Columbus with the number 8 power play advantage on the night. Do you have any interest in kind of these secondary pieces? Because it just seems like it's basically just these two lines that are the ones that do most of the damage. The other lines might chip in a goal or two, but they're not like slate breaking, slate winning type performances on night-to-night basis. And the underlying metrics aren't that strong either.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the concern for me. I think I'd have a little bit of interest in this Columbus second line, even though their line stats aren't really the greatest. On the other side of it too, with Pittsburgh too, you're getting Michael Bunting there on the top power play unit. He's been doing some damage on the man advantage here as of late too. So I don't entirely hate the idea there, but it feels like there's better spots at similar price points that you could get to instead of those guys here tonight.
Yeah, Michael Bunting's been playing pretty well. Don't mind him as a one-off option at all. Okay, let's move on to the game that you care the most about tonight. The Boston Bruins hosting the Edmonton Oilers here, minus 145 road favorites. We've talked about the Bruins being much better under head coach Joe Sacco than they had been under Jim Montgomery, but still road or home underdogs tonight. The matchups look okay on the Bruin side of things. Pretty good for the bottom 6, okay for the top 6. The top line, the Connor McDavid line, draws the best matchup on the Oilers side of things tonight. They're going to see a lot of that Charlie Coyle, Elias Lindholm, Brad Marchand line, and then you're going to see a lot of the David Pastrnak line up against the Leon Draisaitl line. Zach, you would know better than anybody as our resident Oilers fan, but like, this Edmonton second line is really doing most of the heavy lifting right now. And Connor McDavid's had some pretty disappointing performances, especially given his price tag in recent games. But man, Leon Draisaitl is red hot. That second line, the underlying metrics are just unbelievable. 3.1 expected goals for per 60, 31 scoring chances, 13 high danger. They've been awesome, and their price tag still is just extremely affordable at $15,100 to full stack. Draisaitl at just $8,800 feels like one of the better price tags on the entire slate. I mean, he's still cheaper than Braden Point, $1,000 cheaper than Connor McDavid, despite outplaying him recently. And Victor Arvidsson at $3,500 is easily one of the best winger values on the slate as well. So to me, like, I feel like I'm a lot more inclined to going to Edmonton 2 than taking my chances with Edmonton 1, given how expensive McDavid is. That being said, McDavid at 2.9% ownership is always an exciting thing when you can get him that low owned. This obviously isn't the most ideal matchup, but you are a guy that doesn't really seem to care who the Oilers are playing. You're going to find a way to get him in. Are you doing that tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. You know me, Brock. Look, Connor McDavid's been held scoreless in his last 2 games. That's not something that happens very often. And Connor McDavid is somebody who prides himself on generating offense. So To be honest, I'm expecting a big game for McDavid in this top line here tonight. It helps that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has heated up as of late. He's got 6 goals in his last 10 games here, starting to shoot the puck just a little bit more. He's only averaging 2 shots on goal per game over his last 10, but it still feels like a bit of an uptick from what we were seeing late in 2024 there. So I don't mind getting to Edmonton 1, but I do think that Edmonton 2, like you mentioned, they have been just great as of late here. Vasily Podkolzin is finding ways to chip in offensively as of late, 0.9 goals per hour over his last 22.4 assists as well. He's only $2,800. The floor for him is pretty low unless he's getting on the board. But Victor Arvidsson, he has been great as of late and in his own right here too. 1.1 goals per hour of ice time, 1.7 individual expected goals per hour over his last 20 games. Strong shot volume, 10.8 shots on goal per hour. Leon Draisaitl, what more can you say there? I think he's a guy who is right up at the top of the Hart Trophy race right now. I think he's, starting to run away with the Rocket Richard as well. 2.3 goals per hour over his last 20 games. I'll be firing up Edmonton 1 and 2 tonight. I think this is a pretty nice spot for this Oilers side. And I'm expecting a bounce back performance from McDavid here tonight. I don't think he's been held scoreless in 3 games, maybe ever in his entire career.
Yeah, I don't know if ever. It's worth looking into. But yeah, the matchup for him tonight is really good. So, right, as I mentioned, he's going to see a lot of that Lindholm line. They do, they do go up against the opposition's best a lot. The underlying metrics not that strong. They've done a good job actually keeping the puck out of their net, but it doesn't seem like super sustainable. I think that I would be a little bit more interested in Edmonton 1 and Connor McDavid if Hyman was up there. Like, those underlying metrics without Hyman aren't quite as good, but boy, the power play looks like it's in a phenomenal spot tonight. So it's hard to ignore the Oilers when they're in a good power play spot. We know how potent that power play can be. 5th best power play going up against the 27th ranked penalty kill. Yeah, sign me up for that, especially when you factor in the ownership here. As I mentioned, McDavid, 2.9%. Nugent-Hopkins, under 2%. You've got Leon Draisaitl at 3%. I'm sure that Zach Hyman, wherever he is seeing like no percent. Where is he? Here we go. 0.8%. So this is a power play that is seeing literally no ownership tonight in a really, really good spot. And don't forget, yes, the Bruins have looked better, but they just gave up 5 goals in an overtime loss to the Islanders. Prior to that, they gave up 6 goals to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, and they also gave up 6 goals to the Blue Jackets right after Christmas. So this is a team that has been gettable at times. And this Oilers team, obviously, especially if Connor McDavid is looking to kind of bounce back, is in a spot to have a big game. From the Bruins perspective, really a very poor power play matchup. The 5v5 matchups are okay. They've been better offensively, but they're just on a team that draws a lot of my interest more often than not. And when I do play them, they don't seem to do a whole lot. They're not projected for a lot of ownership. As our Oilers fan, are you seeing anything from the Oilers that suggests, hey, maybe tonight's a night to play the Bruins?
Look, I think the Oilers at the end of the day are still a team that's in need of some defensive help. So I think, stacking up against the Oilers is never a terrible idea. Their defensive metrics haven't been as great as they've been in the past as of late here, specifically with that top line giving up 3.2 goals against per hour, 2.7 expected goals against per hour as of late. So I'd be comfortable getting to a little bit of Boston if I was 20 maxing here tonight, given the limited number of lineups that I am building this evening. I'm probably staying off of the Bruins here, but I think there's enough reason to have some interest. David Pastrnak, he's cooked against the Edmonton Oilers in the past, 10 goals, 16 points in 16 games. Brad Marchand's had some success, 10 goals, 19 points in 23 games. And Elias Lindholm knows the Edmonton Oilers very well from his time in Calgary and Vancouver. 22 goals, 37 points in 39 games for him against the Oilers in his career. So I would be comfortable building around those pieces if you were building around the Bruins. I just don't think I'll be getting there tonight.
Yeah, worth mentioning, Stuart Skinner has really turned his season around as well. He's played very, very well since basically the end of November. His last 12 starts, 9-2-1 with a 922 save percentage. He's been especially hot in his last 5 outings, 924 save percentage, hasn't lost in regulation in any of those games. So yeah, Bruins probably not a team that draws a lot of my interest tonight. The low implied total as well. Okay, the Flyers host the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll be tuning into this one just to see Ryan Reeves versus Garnett Hathaway, most likely. After Hathaway injured Jake McCabe, Ryan Reeves draws in the lineup tonight. got to expect some fisticuffs there. The Maple Leafs -136 road favorites, 3.2 implied total, 2.7 implied total for the Philadelphia Flyers. The matchups in this one pretty bleak across the board for everybody. It is worth mentioning though that Toronto 1, man, is just sizzling. Matthew Knies is just seemingly red hot all of a sudden. It's hard to know exactly what to do with Austin Matthews right now. Obviously doesn't seem to be or like seem to be 100%. He comes back. He only plays 17 and a half minutes in his first game back. Then they play him 20 minutes in the overtime win over the Flyers on Sunday. Does have 5 points in 2 games since coming back. So like, it seems like he's fine and you should probably play him as normal. The underlying metrics for this number are this line are just insanely impressive. Despite having a brutal matchup here, I don't mind firing up Toronto 1. They get out 4th best overall, just 5% ownership. Ivan Fedotov, not a goalie that scares me at all. Nye just $4,300. Seems like a great value with as hot as he's been. Matthews, obviously the most expensive player on the slate, is a little worrisome at $10,000, but Mitch Marner under 8K doesn't really seem fair to Mitch Marner given how just unbelievable he's been this year. So yeah, at 22,100, this line is very interesting and a line that I'm probably going to get plenty of exposure to tonight because the Flyers are fairly solid defensively. Don't get me wrong, but Fedotov is just not a guy that, like I said, worries me all that much. I think that Toronto's in a, not the best spot of the night, but they're, they would be among my top 5 favorites this evening. So I'm going to be playing Toronto 1. Toronto 2 grades out a little bit worse. They're just a little bit too expensive. Tavares at 7,700 and Nylander at 8,000. Just with the underlying metrics not being quite as good, I'll probably shift my focus mainly on Toronto 1. What are you doing with the Toronto side of things tonight? And then we'll get to why we're playing Philadelphia 3, obviously.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about one of our favorite pun plays as of late here. But yeah, I do have some interest in this Toronto side. I think for me, it's in Toronto 1 here tonight. Austin Matthews, like you mentioned, I mean, he looks like he's healthy in his 2 games since returning from injury. 32 DraftKings points against the Bruins, 5 shots on goal in that game, 15.8 points against the Flyers, and in Leafs' most recent games, 3 shots on goal, 2 apples in that game. So he seems to be firing on all cylinders right now. I think I'll be mixing them in one of my lineups for the 5 that I am building. A reason for that too is, you're getting some good power play exposure there with Matthews and Marner on that top unit. And the Leafs have a pretty good spot here on the power play tonight, 18th ranked power play. For themselves over their last 10 games, but the 4th best matchup here. I mean, the Flyers are taking 2.7 penalties per game here as of late. So I think there's some reason to have interest here in the Leafs. I won't be going crazy or anything like that, but just given how hot Matthew Knies is right now, it gives you a little salary relief at $4,300. Obviously it's an expensive line, 22,100, second most expensive on the slate behind Tampa 1. But I think at that price point, you still have the ability to do some fairly nice things with the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, the power play matchup here is absolutely outstanding, and definitely a reason to target both the top 6 lines of the Maple Leafs. Obviously, you got Tavares and Nylander on that top unit as well. Really, really good spot here for Toronto. I think that people are probably staying off them a little bit just because, it was a fairly tight game the other night. The Maple Leafs on the second half of a back-to-back, though, in that one. Only a 3-2 win, but they still were able to generate a fair amount of offense. And then obviously the power play is in just such a good spot tonight. So definitely interested in the Leafs. With Jake McCabe out of the lineup, I do think that the Leafs, blue line is going to, struggle a little bit in this one, which, piques my interest a little bit on the Philadelphia Flyers side of things. But just with the way that these lines are currently constructed, it just it's pretty gross, right? Like with Palin between Tippett and Konechny, I mean, their offensive metrics are horrendous. The second line with Lawton up there, the offensive metrics are not good. So it's kind of just being like, okay, let's just focus in on Philadelphia 3 as a value option tonight. They've been playing extremely well. 4.3 goals for per 60 is awesome. They're generating a lot of high danger looks. The matchup here is pretty good. They're going to see a lot of the middle 6 for the Maple Leafs. That's not the best matchup ever, but it's reasonable. So yeah, I don't mind taking some punch shots on Philly 3. I think that they've been good enough to us in recent games to continue to warrant a little bit of our trust. If you're trying to find yourself an $8,000 stack, they grade out as the best option in that realm. And I have no problem getting to them if I'm trying to play some of these outrageously expensive stacks like Tampa Bay or something like that. So not a line, obviously, that I'm going to play a ton of, but they're they're in the mix, they're in the player pool, especially if you're playing a 20 max. Like if you're only 3 maxing or single entering, then yeah, this is not the line for you. But if you're building a lot and you want some exposure to these super expensive lines, you need somebody to pair with them. Philadelphia 3 has been in a pretty good spot as of late. So are you kind of thinking the same thing, not really focused on the top 6 here, the Flyers, mostly just maybe a punt play of Philly 3?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I'm mainly focusing around Tyson Forster and Noah Cates. Each of these guys over their last 20 games, Forster 1.6 goals per hour, Noah Cates 1.5. In their last 10 games, Noah Cates has 5 goals and 9 points, averaging 9.8 DraftKings points per game. Tyson Forster, 6 goals, 9 points in last 10 games, 10.4 DraftKings points per game. They're paying off in pretty solid ways, but they're mainly paying off through scoring goals. So they're going to need a goal there at the very least to be able to pay off here on this slate tonight. But in the same breath, that price point, $2,800, $2,900, they're not that expensive whatsoever. And like you said, you can fit them with some of these more expensive lines on this slate. They'll definitely be in the mix for me in the 5 that I'm building.
Let's get to the next game. We've got the Minnesota Wild and St. Louis Blues. This game as a whole doesn't look all that appealing. The matchups on both sides are pretty bad outside of the matchup that St. Louis 1 is going to see. Really rough matchups on the Minnesota Wild side of things. They're, without Kirill Kaprizov, this is just a team that's not generating a whole lot of offense. They haven't been terrible. They've had a couple of decent performances, but for the most part, not great. They're coming off of 3 strong games in a row, 5-3 win over the Predators, 4-3 shootout win over the Capitals, and a 4-0 win over the Hurricanes. So they've been able to get it done recently, but it's not a team that you are looking at and routinely expecting offense, because just prior to that, they had been shut out. They had scored 1 goal in like 3 consecutive games. So it's not a team that I look at, okay, these 3 strong games in a row are who this team is moving forward. This game as a whole looks like one that is fairly low scoring. It's one of the lowest pace games of the night, and just not a game that I have much interest in. I've been playing a lot of St. Louis recently. St. Louis 2 specifically just continues to grade out pretty well. They grade out 24th tonight at $13,900. I like the shot volume you get with guys like Holloway. Shen's been solid. Kyrie's obviously good. But in this matchup, Philip Gustafson getting the start. He's been maybe the best goalie, one of the best top 3 goalies for sure in the league this year. It's just not a game that has a lot of my interest. Are you any different?
I'm a little torn on this one because I have been playing a pretty good amount of St. Louis 2 as well here as of late, and they've been awesome. I mean, you look at Dylan Holloway, 1.8 goals per hour over his last 20 games. Jordan Kyrou, 1.9 goals per hour. Holloway, 10.5 shots on goal per hour. Kyrou, 9.6 shots on goal per hour. What's interesting too is that both Kyrou and Shen have had some success against Minnesota in the past. Kyrou, 11 goals, 22 points in 21 games. Braden Shen, 10 goals, 28 points in 38 games. Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich both have had some success too. Buch specifically, 9 goals, 19 points in, what is that? 19 games. Yeah, 9 goals, 19 points in 19 games. So I don't know. I might try and get a little bit different here and play some St. Louis 2 again here tonight with some Cam Fowler mixed in there for a little exposure at 5-on-5. I kind of like the idea there, but I mean, it does feel like it's a bit of a tough one here just in terms of the matchups and the St. Louis team, like you said, really trying to choke opposing teams out right now. So I don't know if I'll get there on the Minnesota side of things as well. Without Kaprizov, it just feels kind of ugly to play the Minnesota Wild. And I'm not entirely sold that that top line has the juice to get it done here tonight. And in the same breath, too, like they're projecting for a pretty good amount of ownership here at 11.5%. That's got to be within the top 2 or 3 here on the entire slate. So they do grade out as the 6th best line to target here tonight. I'm just not sure if I'll be getting there.
Yes. Sorry, couldn't find the mute button. To me, this is kind of like you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them moment. And that's kind of how I feel with St. Louis, because yeah, I think that I've had a lot of success playing them, but they've been playing well. They've scored a shitload of goals in like their last 5 games. 6 games, 4 goals, 7 goals, 2 goals, 6 goals, 4 goals, 4 goals, but not really the who's who of defensive hockey clubs in those games. The Red Wings, the Predators, the Sabres, the Blackhawks, the Senators, and the Blue Jackets. So they've been kind of taking advantage of some of these less talented defensive teams. And the Wild are obviously a team that plays pretty well defensively. They could get Jake Middleton back tonight, which helps. Obviously, missing some blue line pieces makes them a little bit more gettable. So I don't mind maybe mixing in a little bit of St. Louis because, yeah, the value's there, really solid floors as well. And then, like as we mentioned, the Minnesota Wild side of things is just pretty bleak without Kaprizov. Jordan Binnington hasn't necessarily been all that sharp recently, dating back to November 30th, just a 901 save percentage in his last 11 starts. So I can kind of see where people might be interested in Minnesota. I think like the reason that they're just projecting really well, and that's where a lot of the ownership comes from. They project as the 4th best line in terms of raw projections. So yeah, they look okay, but yeah, probably not. It's probably a line that I feel fairly comfortable fading. The power play matchup is really, I think, what's driving a lot of their love tonight, but these are two teams that are very disciplined, don't take or draw a lot of penalties. So even though the power play matchup looks pretty good, could be only 1 or 2 power plays for the Wild or the Blues tonight. So yeah, this is a game for the most part that I'll be staying away from. But when you've got Marco Rossi just absolutely cooking at $4,600, it's a great value play. Matt Boldy starting to kind of come back to life at $6,300. I get it. It's just probably not the play for me. I think there's just a lot more interesting spots on this slate that I'm going to be focusing my attention on. Any final thoughts on this one before we move on? Because we only got 20 minutes left of you, Zach, before you take off.
We got to grind through it. So let's move along here to Winnipeg and Nashville.
Winnipeg, Nashville. So this game we talked about last time they played was the game where the Jets opened at like minus 160, and then it was bet down all the way to like minus 115. The Jets won 3-0 in a shutout. And then tonight it actually opened at minus 130 and has moved to 160 for the Jets. So that sharp group out there, whoever these people were that were smashing the Predators, learned their lesson in that one. And the money's actually coming in on the Winnipeg side of things. And I think that makes all the sense in the world. The Nashville Predators, not an offense that really is all that interesting to me. We've seen Nashville one just continuously garnering an outrageous amount of ownership. That is not going to be the case tonight, and for good reason. The offensive metrics for them honestly have not been all that awe-inspiring. They've been scoring at 4.1 goals for per 60, but really not generating a lot. Tonight they're going to get that brutal matchup against the Lowry line. I'm out. That night I was more interested in Nashville too. And Ryan O'Reilly literally put up 0. So I'm not going back to that. He scored a hat trick in his last game, but I'm not buying in on it this time around. The matchup for them is pretty bleak as well. So I think it was a 3-game slate that night. We were trying to get weird. Tonight, it just doesn't feel necessary to get to the Nashville side of things. The Winnipeg Jets side of things, in that meeting, Winnipeg won, absolutely dominated the Predators at 5v5. And then obviously the Winnipeg power play unit grades out number 1 overall over the last 10 games. They've been red hot all season. The Predators PK is solid, but this is a Jets team that I feel comfortable getting back to tonight. And hopefully they can just continue to roll against the Predators. Not seeing very much ownership at all. I bet the under in this game overall, but I do think that this Winnipeg one line can chip in a goal, 2, maybe 3, and really break this slate open at very low ownership. While you chat about this game, I'll pull up the numbers from that first one. Are you in on Winnipeg, or are you fading this game mostly?
Yeah, I've got interest in Winnipeg one here. I think they're a pretty nice little get different spot here. They're projecting for pretty low ownership, only 3.9%, and they come out as the second best line to target on the slate as a whole here. And I can see why. The offensive numbers, they're nothing spectacular, but they're just rock solid. And it feels like that's what Winnipeg one has been this year. They've just been a steady, consistent line generating offense. Their power play continues to be just an absolute smash. Top ranked over the last 10 games in the league here. 5th best matchup on the entire slate for the power play unit. Going up against a Nashville team that's pretty undisciplined, 3.1 times shorthanded per game over their last 10. It's worth noting Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Gabe Vilardi, all pretty much point per game players in their careers going up against the Nashville Predators. In 2 games this year, though, Mark Scheifele only averaging 5.6 DraftKings points per game against the Preds. Gabe Vilardi, 2 goals, 14.5 points per game. And Kyle Connor in those 2 games, just 2 assists, 7 shots on goal, 10.9 points per game. That's not really scaring me off of them here tonight. I think they're in a really nice spot.
in that game, they had 24 shot attempts in 12 minutes of 5v5 ice time. They generated 13 scoring chances, 7 high danger chances. They were unbelievable. Velarde, 9 shot attempts that night. Scheifele, 9 shot attempts that night. Kyle Connor, 9 shot attempts that night. No issue with 27 shot attempts as a trio at 5v5 and on the power play. More than comfortable getting back to Winnipeg 1 in this spot. 2 games to go. We've got the Ducks and the Flames. This game's going to kind of make or break the slate, I think. It feels like, at least. The Flames are in such an interesting spot. It's worth mentioning, obviously, Troy Terry is a game-time decision tonight. His wife is in labor. They said they don't know if he's going to play or not. To me, reading the tea leaves, they shuffled the deck. They shuffled the lines. Usually it's pretty easy to tell, hey, this guy is clearly a placeholder. They unveiled 3 new look lines, and it looks like and feels like they did that with the intention of playing without Troy Terry tonight. So I would imagine they're going to go ahead without him tonight. I know if my wife was in labor, she would not let me go play a hockey game hours after having a baby, but hey, everyone's different. The matchups here for the Duck side of things are pretty bleak anyway. Probably not a team that I'm going to get to. You take a look here. Like, we've talked about Anaheim won a lot this year. Without Troy Terry, those numbers just completely plummet. So I'm comfortable staying off of them. Anaheim 2 continues to pop up as just a great offensive play. But man, when they're on the ice, it's just all gas, no brakes. Their offensive metrics still really good. Their defensive metrics are unbelievably bad. So you want basically whoever is going to face the top 6 of the Ducks the most tonight, and it's going to be a bit of a mix. The top line, which we've played a lot of, the Kadri line, drawing a great matchup tonight against that Ryan Strome line without Troy Terry. And then it's going to be kind of a mix of the second and third line here up against that really, really bad Anaheim second line. So I feel pretty comfortable getting to all parts of this Calgary offense tonight. And they're really not drawing as much ownership as I anticipated. 13,700. Huberdeau has been great. Kadri's been awesome. That mini stack is one that I have a ton of interest in tonight. Then you've got Coleman, Backlund, and Coronado. They're drawing a lot more ownership at 7.7%. Backlund, or Coleman, excuse me, at 10%. Feels like a nice play. A little bit higher owned, but they look great. And then I have to mention it. The matchup isn't quite as good for Calgary 3, but their metrics here aren't quite as good as what you actually have gotten out of them. And again, it's one of those sample sizes that's just a little bit too small for me to include in the charts because I can't just break the charts by including it. But Zach, while you chat about this game, I'll pull up Calgary 3's actual numbers and I might be able to sway you into them as a value option tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting game for a number of reasons. In my DFO head-to-head, I actually do have Anaheim 2 there, a mini stack of Mason McTavish and Robbie Fabry. And I'm admittedly a little bit scared of it. But in the same breath, they're really popping as a value play as the 13th best line to target here on this slate. You know, most of their offense has been coming from, Robbie Fabry in terms of the goal production, 1.1 goals per hour of ice time over his last 20 games. But Mason McTavish has been a little bit snake bit as of late. In his last 20, 1.1 expected goals, individual expected goals per hour, just 0.5 goals per hour. So obviously they're going to see a little bit of ice time going up against that Calgary Flames second line, which we know is a strong shutdown line, but some time there against the bottom 6. It's going to be a little bit tough for the Ducks for sure. I'm fully cognizant of that, but I think in terms of pivot options or punt options, cheap lines to target, I don't hate the idea of getting to Anaheim too. You know, the Calgary Flames, as a noted Edmonton Oilers fanatic, I don't mind getting to some Calgary Flames too, because I seem to play a lot of them in DFS. And it makes a ton of sense why. Like, they're just tremendous value within this top 6. You know, the Huberdeau Kadri Minning stack, as you mentioned, Calgary 2, as you're about to talk about, Calgary 3. I think they're all fine plays here on this slate. So I'm going to be pretty comfortable getting exposure to this game here, especially because it's the highest paced game of the night at 102.4. That's a pretty big number. We don't often see pace scores getting up that high.
Yeah, and we know that we've talked about it a lot. This Flames team not quite as good on the road either. They don't have the ability to match up that Michael Backlund line against the opposition's best. And their road struggles have been fairly well documented. I mean, obviously, Dustin Wolf getting the start tonight instead of Dan Vladar makes me a little bit less interested in Anaheim. But like, you look at this Flames team, they've lost, like, I can't count this quickly, but it looks like something along the lines of 9 out of their last 11 on the road. They've given up at least 3 goals in all but 2 of those games. So they're definitely gettable on the road. And yeah, I think that the Ducks second line represents a very, reasonable, cheap option tonight. We've talked about them a lot. They're not seeing much ownership. I don't mind getting to them at $3,000, $3,600, even Gauthier at 35. The actual numbers on Calgary 3 really quickly. 3.9 expected goals for per 60, 35.6 scoring chances for per 60, and 14.6 high danger chances for per 60. When you stack those numbers up, that's the best of the bunch from the Flame side of things. So that is a line that I think is also extremely interesting. They're not going to pop on the charts because, like I said, the value or the actual sample doesn't include that. But again, if you're looking for these $3,000 players, you've got Sharon Govich at 3,800, Zari at 3,700 would be the most interesting. But then Peltier there as well at $2,500. Full stack them for 10K. With the way they've been playing, I think this is a game that can open up. Now, I don't know what it is about John Gibson, but like whenever he's in net, I'm like, oh, this is a gettable spot. He's literally been one of the best goalies in the league. He actually leads the league in goals, a goal saved above expected per 60 this year. So like the Ducks goaltending duo has been unbelievable. But the thing is, the reason he faces so many expected goals is because they're terrible defensively. So there's a little bit of give and take there. Like he's still giving up goals because they're terrible defensively, but he's still making goals saves above expected because he's still playing well. So, I have a lot of interest in the Flames, but like I'm going to be over the field on the Flames, but I'm not going to go too crazy. You're not going to get too carried away. What are you doing? Final thoughts on this game before we move on?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, they've really struggled on the road here as of late this season, so I don't think I'm going to be getting crazy, but I don't mind some one-offs or some mini stacks here of this Calgary top 9 rather.
Moving on to the final game of the night, you've got the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights are the largest favorites on the slate, despite being on the road. Minus 251 road favorites, 3.9 implied total. The Sharks, the biggest underdog, obviously lowest implied total of the night. Pretty brutal matchups across the board for the San Jose Sharks, a team that I'm probably not playing any of tonight. The Golden Knights, though, man, they look like they're in a really, really good spot tonight. The ownership is actually quite modest. The top line just 9% as a whole. Eichel at 14%. The second line at just 4%. And with I imagine that these numbers are going to climb a little bit with Alexander Georgiev now confirmed to get the start for the Sharks. But nonetheless, man, this looks like an outstanding spot for this top 6 of the Vegas Golden Knights. 96.2 matchup score, 93.7 matchup score for both of those lines. The offensive metrics are really, really good. I've been playing Vegas too like crazy. I'm like low-key addicted to it, I think, because their floor is really, really solid. The shot volume you get from them is great. But then you look at this 1.9 actual goals versus 3.0 expected goals, and you realize why I'm losing money on DFS playing Vegas too. This feels like a spot in which they can get it going again. Like Hurdle in San Jose. I used that narrative last time they played a couple weeks ago. I think he had 0 points in that game. So, like, it's a line I'm going back to for sure tonight, but it steered me wrong a lot. So, I'm probably not going to get too carried away, but it's just 4.3% owner. It's definitely a line that is in a, you can easily get over the field on. From a value standpoint tonight, they grade out third best overall behind just Minnesota 1 and Dallas 2. So they look like they're in a great spot. Obviously, the top line with Tanner Pearson up there has been pretty good. Pearson at just 3K, 7.1% owned. Usually don't play a lot of Mark Stone. He's just so expensive, but this line does, has just been unbelievable this year, and I'll definitely be getting exposure to them. But I'll probably have more Vegas too because I'm addicted. Tell me why I'm an insane person.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to get you to a rehab center here for your Vegas 2 addiction. It's starting to get concerning, but I can understand why you keep going back to the well. And I think the truth of the matter is that with Pavel Doroflorev up there on that second line, it gives me a little bit more interest because he's taken 10.6 shots on goal per hour of ice time over his last 20 games. So he's going to help raise the floor of that line as a whole. I think I'd probably be more comfortable personally going with like a mini stack of Hurdle and Doroflorev here and probably leaving William Karlsson off of that stack. So he's probably going to go off tonight and go absolutely bonkers. This whole top 6 for this Vegas side looks really great tonight. I'm going to throw some numbers at you here really quick. In the 2 games against the Sharks this season, Pavel Doroflorev, 2 goals, 4 points, 13 shots on goal, averaging 27 DraftKings points per game. Thomas Hurdle in the 2 games, 2 assists, 9.3 points per game. Jack Eichel in the 2 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 23 points per game. Mark Stone, in the 2 games, 2 goals, 5 points, 23 points per game. And lastly, Tanner Pearson, who has been red hot here as of late, 3 goals, 7 points in his last 10 games on the top line at just 3K, a goal and a couple of shots on goal, a couple blocks, 8.6 points per game. I've got a ton of interest here on this Vegas side, and I'm going to be getting them into the mix tonight in my 5 lineups for sure. It seems like an absolute smash spot here. You take a look at the defensive metrics for the San Jose Sharks, and they're just absolutely abysmal right
Just
now.
a sea of red.
Just a sea of red out there, not the Calgary Flames kind either. So, the other advantage for the Golden Knights tonight is the power play. They seem like they're actually in a pretty good spot here. They don't have the greatest ranked as of late here, just 19th best, but they're going up against a 28th ranked penalty kill and a Sharks team that's really undisciplined, shorthanded 3.2 times per game over their last 10. So yeah, fire me up here on this Vegas side tonight.
Yeah, like I'm actually stunned by the ownership. Like I said, I would imagine it's going to come up, but the 2 meetings this season, I mean, you've given all the in-depth stats, but they've won 7-3 and 6-3. They've scored 13 goals in 2 games. It's insane. A couple of funny comments here. Tom says most insane domination I've seen from 2 with 0 goals. He's talking about Vegas 2's performance against Buffalo the other night. The shot attempts were 19-4 when they were on the ice. They had 0.82 expected goals for and 0.01 expected goals against. Literally just didn't let Buffalo touch the puck. And then I love getting hurt by Vegas too. This is my burner account, by the way. Because yeah, it's just, I play him like crazy and like nothing good ever really seems to come of it. But okay, we're running out of time here, Zach. I know you got to go do Oilers Nation every day. Early start for you guys with them being on the East Coast. So let's get to our favorite defenseman tonight. Zach Werenski. Moving on. Just kidding. Okay. A lot of good options tonight. I like Zach Werenski. And I also like Thomas Harley. And I don't mind Jackson Lacombe. And Brock Faber looks okay, despite that team being pretty middling tonight. Country Miller is a great punt at $2,800. Grades out extremely, extremely well. You love Cam Fowler. I don't love the spot, but I like the price tag. He's been fine. Who else looks pretty good tonight? Nick Blankenberg is just literally unbelievable every single night. Going to play him again, even though they're not going to score any goals tonight. Rasmus Ristolainen has kind of perked up a little bit lately. Don't mind getting to him. That's probably it. Ty Smith's still a top power play quarterback for the Hurricanes, but don't love that spot really. Anybody that sticks out to you?
I think Moritz Seider, I mentioned him earlier. I think he's a nice little play at $5,800, correlated with the top 6 of the Detroit Red Wings on the power play. A couple of punt plays. Drew Hellison looks pretty solid at $2,500 here tonight. Thomas Harley, Keandre Miller, you mentioned them. Jonas Brodin at $4,200 looks like he's a really solid value here with a pretty solid floor as of late. Jackson Lacombe, I like him. And Nick Blankenberg, as you mentioned too, $2,600. He's the new Mark Del Gaizo. If anybody here remembers us playing him like mad earlier this season. Then another shout, Braden Schneider. I always like playing him. His price has actually come down to just $2,600, but a really solid floor from him as of late as well, going up against the Dallas team that looks like they're in a prime position.
Just taking a quick look at ownership here. Werenski, far and away the highest owned defenseman on the slate, followed by Faber, Letang, Anderson, Heiskanen, Josh Morrissey, Mackenzie Weegar, Thomas Harley, Thomas Chabot, Erik Karlsson rounding out the top 10. Let's get to the goalies tonight. Joseph Woll grades out as the number 1 goalie to target on the slate at just $7,900. Pretty good price tag for a guy that is expected to see 30 shots and has an implied total of just 2.7 goals against. So Joseph Woll looks like a strong play. Connor Hellebuck, just coming off a shutout against this national team, $8,400. Bit of a disappointing performance against the Red Wings the other night, but I liked it. Most owned goalie on the slate at 15.7%. Looks like he's in a great spot. Samsonov at $8,600 is insane. Probably won't get there, but has the highest implied win percentage on the slate. Don't mind Ottinger. I do still think that the Rangers possess enough offense to where he might not be the greatest play. But like defensively, that team just still sucks ass. I love the shot volume you're going to get out of Andrei Vasilevsky. Philip Gustafsson, like I said, been one of the best goalies in the world. I'm sure you're not playing much Gustafsson because you love St. Louis still. Who are you looking to play? Because to me, one of the most interesting plays in the slate is Jordan Binnington at $7,100. I think I'm going to get to him a decent amount. But Sam Montembeault taught me yesterday, don't play too much of your favorite punt goalie or else your night could be ruined instantly.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? That was a rough one for you. There's a lot of goalies that I actually kind of like on this slate. I don't mind that like mid to low K, 8K range, basically from Skinner up to Hellebuck. So that includes those two guys, Philip Gustafson, Dustin Wolf, Joseph Wall, I think is probably my favorite play. It's 7,900 tonight. But I also really like Jake Ottinger at 7,800 bucks. I think he's a solid play. Vasilevsky, as you mentioned too, he looks to be in a pretty solid spot for me. So that's probably the range that I'll be sticking in with my player pool tonight.
Okay, before we get to the daily face-off, our head-to-head lineup challenge, if you want to participate in the hat-trick pick challenge, comment your hat-trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube. If your player scores a hat-trick tonight, we'll give you a $25 gift card to nationgear.ca. We have nearly 1,800 live viewers at the moment, including nearly 100 on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, please smash that like button. Let's get to 100 likes for the first time this year. Really trying to grow that page, and that helps a lot. So thank you guys so much for your support. And shout out to our friends at rotogrinders.com for providing us with projected ownership for tonight's show. We couldn't do it without them. Really leveled up this show. We appreciate them extremely very much. And if you want to get $20 off your first month of RotoGrinders NHL Premium, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube and take everything you learned in today's show, throw it into their optimizer, and build the optimal lineup to winning tonight. Okay, Zach, let's get to our head-to-head really quick. I know you got to go in about 30 seconds, so here we go. You go first. You won yesterday.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's right. I did win yesterday. Love my lineup here tonight. No Edmonton Oilers for me, which feels a little bit strange, but I think I built a really nice looking GPP lineup here tonight. Couple of mini stacks, Sean Monahan and Kirill the Thrill Marchenko with Zach Werenski. Nice to see Zach spelling his name properly with the H there at the end. Little Dallas 2 mini stack as well. Duchesne, Jamie Benn, drivers of the offense there. Mentioned it earlier, getting a little Anaheim too. I'm terrified. I'm not going to lie to you whatsoever. Totally ready for some bagels there from them, but I won't get a bagel from Jackson Lacombe as he continues to be a solid value option. I mentioned Joseph Wall as one of my favorite goaltenders tonight, so I got him in the mix there. 7,900 bucks, still leaving 200 bucks on the table here. Get myself a little bit different with some lower owned plays while munching up some of that chalk tonight.
I too love my lineup, so we're both going to be crying tonight, most likely. Yeah, very easy. Full stack Dallas 2. They look unbelievable. Full stack Vegas 2. They look unbelievable. They always do. They're probably going to break my heart again. Zach Werenski is the best player on the slate. Thomas Harley, one of the best value defensemen on the slate. Jordan Binnington's all I had money left over for, but at $7,100, I think he's a pretty good play. The Minnesota Wild don't score that many goals. I'm trying to roll really fast for you, Zach. Who's your hat-trick pick tonight?
Let's go with Zach Werenski.
That is unbelievable. I'm going to go Gabe Velarde. If you want to participate, make sure you comment in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Zach, we did it. We got out of here in an hour, got you to your live show. Best of luck on your next show. You were just grinding through it today. We'll be back tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Eastern for a 4-game slate. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, cheers.
Cheers.